first many years of my career. And a lot of the things I hear from people now, especially since AI has been introduced, is that the things they struggle with in terms of focus and attention and getting things done are really the same things that I'm struggling with. I just happen to struggle before the rest of you did. So that is what this talk is. This is not me giving you 10 ways to use Claude to do things for you. This is battle-tested systems that I've tried over the years, and I'm still using all of these today. So this is like a toolbox. You can take as much or as little from it as you like. There's very little sort of like theory. We're going to talk a little bit about some theory behind attention, but this is primarily a toolbox that I'm hoping will help some of you find a sustainable way of working. So this is what we have on the agenda for today. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about what it is about focus and attention that has become so hard these days. Like, what has happened? Have we, been degrading as human beings and turning into, creatures incapable of deep work? Probably not. We're then going to dive right into the toolkit, starting with the basics, the time management, the energy management, and your sort of overall work environment. We're going to talk about how to get started on large tasks, or, sometimes any task. We're going to talk about procrastination, ways you can sort of get around that to try and get some work done on what you're actually supposed to be doing. Then we're going to talk about what for me 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. Like, try and remember the time before the smartphone, right? Life was a lot simpler back then. Back then, if you were out, walking your dog, that was what you were doing. You weren't also being online on your phone and available for everybody else. We're also consuming an incredible amount of information at a speed that has never been seen before. And all of that means that the world in general has just become a lot more complicated to live in, even down to when you go grocery shopping. 20 or 30 years ago, maybe you had 3 types of cereal to choose from. If you go to the grocery store now, what do you have, 20 or 30 or more sometimes, right? So the world got more complicated. There's really nothing wrong with us. It's just that the world is evolving at a speed where our brains can't really keep up. Because in reality, our brain is like, a 50,000-year-old feature, right? It hasn't really kept up with the evolution that the world around us is seeing. And so this is like a general overview. Like, this is a grossly simplified explanation. You can probably do entire talks on this topic alone. But we tend to think of focus and attention as something we should be able to switch on and off at will, like some sort of magical button, right? Push it, oh, I'm focused now. But that's not really how it works. The way it really works is more like a balance between competing neural systems inside your brain, and these 4 are sort of the main players in that balance. The prefrontal cortex is sort of the CEO or the project manager. It's responsible for things like decision-making, planning, impulse control, that kind of stuff. Then we have the anterior cingulate cortex. I'm sure I did not pronounce that right. This is the traffic controller. It helps you switch between tasks. Also helps you in determining what task is worth switching your attention for. Then we have the striatum, which is like the reward center. This is the part of your brain that sort of provides you with dopamine, gives you a little dopamine reward every time you tick a little box off of your to-do list or ship code or whatever it is that does it for you. Then we have the amygdala, which is sort of the alarm system, or sometimes also called the security guard. And what can happen if you're under a lot of stress, especially if it is a, let's say, moderate amount of stress, but in prolonged periods of time, is that the amygdala will release cortisol into your brain. Cortisol is a stress hormone. And given enough cortisol over time, the amygdala will eventually hijack control away from your prefrontal cortex. So your capability of doing planning, decision-making, impulse control will lower over time, especially if you're sort of exposed to prolonged stress over time. So, most of you have probably seen a graph like this before, right? The reality is that we do our best work when we're in deep focus mode. And the problem with the world today is that it's very hard to get enough uninterrupted time to get any deep work done. And so this graph says it beautifully, I think, that what seems to be like just a short little interruption is really quite costly in terms of both productivity but also effectiveness. So you can probably imagine it, right? You're sitting here and you're debugging some sort of complex production issue. You have logs open everywhere and some documentation over here and some notes somebody wrote at some point over here, and you're starting to see, okay, there's some sort of thing over here related to something over here. You're starting to form like a hypothesis of what the problem is. And then somebody comes and taps you on the shoulder. Maybe you get an email notification. That you just have to check what's in that email or whatever it could be. And by the time you get back to what you were doing, you will have lost most of that sort of mental model you've built of what it is you were doing. So even though you have like bits and pieces of it, maybe you remember there was something about an ID somewhere in some sort of log, the reality is that the majority of it will be gone by then. And so what the brain needs to do is it needs to rebuild that mental model again, mostly from scratch, which is very sort of resource intensive for the brain. In general, everything that the prefrontal cortex does is very resource intensive. And when I say resource, I mean oxygen and glucose and that kind of stuff, which means that it becomes tired very easily. which is why you can sort of say that you get context switched to death, because that's what it feels like. A lot of this during a workday also produces a lot of stuff that you now, as a human, and you have one task progress, right? We don't have the power to do that, at least productive where we act. And a good way to start with this is to do about 1.5 hours, say 3 times a week. It's a place to get started, right? But in reality, you can adjust this to your needs in any way you like. If what you need is an hour at the end of every day, by all means, go ahead and block that. What I've also found very useful is to block time for code reviews and to batch them. Because code reviews now more than ever have become a bottleneck. So we don't want to have our colleagues waiting for us to get things done, right? They don't want to wait 2 days because that's where I can't do that. To do the context switching it needs to do without spending as many resources. And essentially, that means give it time. So instead of going straight from deep focus code work, set off 5 or 10 minutes before a meeting to just leave yourself a little breadcrumb or write a line of code that will break if you try to build it, so that you know when you get back, oh yeah, right, that was what I was doing. Sort of to necessarily block time for ramp in and ramp out. I know instinctively that that's what I should be doing, right? But sometimes, if there is a lot of things going on, I will block my calendar so it looks like this. And as you can see from one of the days, I will sometimes start it with this, is you take like a piece of paper or whatever, you write down every single day what you've done, different tasks, and you try to put them into one of these 3 categories. And after 1 or 2 weeks, I would recommend 2 weeks, you look at your sort of results and validate. Approaching the task I try and do is to piercing somewhere where people are walking back and forth all the time. That will fall into the same category. I'm not saying you should become like clean desk heroes overnight. What I'm saying is maybe you can just take it and put it into a drawer, or maybe you can take it and put it to the side so it's outside the rug. It's now free time. And it seems what ends up happening is it looks like the screenshot above, right? You can't even see what the fuck it is I'm having open, right? So whenever I have to go back and find something, I spend 5 minutes looking for it. And sometimes I'll even forget what I was looking for in the first place, which is not very productive now, is it? So for that, I've sort of implemented 2 rules. One is, if I don't need this right now, I can close it. If I do need it, I put it into a tab group. And tab groups will be called different things in different browsers. I believe tab stacks or tab islands are also some of the terms it goes by. But you can probably visually see how much it clears up your browser space. It also means that you can put your sort of open tabs into different categories or belonging to different tasks, meaning that going back and forth between tasks, if you have to, becomes a lot easier. It becomes easier to find what is relevant for that specific task. And the beauty of it, at least if you're using Chrome, which I am, so I'm using their tab groups, is that if I close my browser and shut down my laptop by the end of the day and turn it on the next day, it will still remember all of these tab groups, which is great. Because in the event that there is some sort of production outage where I have to, throw away what I'm doing right now and go, help someone, it's any task really. Sometimes getting started is, it's called Eat the Frog. And this works especially well because what you will do is when you get into work, you will try to identify whatever is the hardest or most difficult task. Time left, this method, which is the snowball method. So the concept here is that whenever you get little things done, when you can check small things off of your to-do part. So what time to do, and I spend about 5 hours working on it. It's really trying to help you, except it's not really helpful. at least not all the time. So how do we deal with that? In the back of your office, move the Legos and whatever your favorite, make myself stop, so I need something that can make me stop, that will force me to not do that, to go into these various news sites and whatnot. So I installed a website blocker. The first one I installed was cold turkey, and it's the one I'm using today. Let's try and trying to doing more enjoyable. And this is very individual. You can do whatever floats your boat, really. Maybe it's to do with the way we think about tasks, and so this is a little bit more difficult. But what we supposed to be doing is that you're actually increasing supposed to be wake up, right? And the beauty of the human brain is that it is also very adaptable. So if you think positive things about the tasks you're doing, especially the ones that you used to think negative things of, over time. So, meetings. Does anyone in here genuinely enjoy meetings? No shame if you do. Thank you. I wish I was you, really. Good meetings. Meeting participant. This is more meant to help you get out of these meetings in a less sort of tired state. Obviously, state, meaning you will process. Also, to ask questions. Hands busy, right? More sort of working memory. And I know this sounds simple, but it is a really, really effective tool. There are various sorts of apps and whatnot out there you can use for this. I use Clicker, very nice free. So what you want to do, especially if we're a little stressed as well, figuring out what the most important thing to be working on, what that task is, be extremely useful. I use it both for work, but also for my private life, to try and figure out what is the most urgent thing right now. And this can also be, there are various tools for it, but I just use a whiteboard at home. At work, I tend to just use a piece of paper. Works fine. What it does is it forces you to look at all of the tasks that you have and sort of weigh them against each other. Like, what is it I really need to be doing right now? Because a lot of the time there are things that feel urgent, but aren't really. And this helps identifying them. It helps make it clear what your priorities are. The first one is the magical maybe. It is the fact that notifications aren't arriving on a specific schedule, meaning of whether or not there was. I started realizing I spent a lot of time on my phone when I was really intended to do something else. And again, I tried I just need to pull myself together and grow a spine, blah, 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 which again did not work whatsoever. So I figured maybe what I need is like that I would, if I start to out in your immediate Googling. So when I installed this app, that was about middle of December, I think, so I've had it installed for 6 months. My average daily usage of the Chrome app was 3 hours. Really, I still need. It's also important to say, with our family and things, I've tried various types of sports and going to the gym and whatnot, and I mean, I'll last 2 to 3 months, and then I'll be bored by it, and then I'll end up not going. And we all know that, exercise is really good for you. You should be doing it because it will help you, be more productive and more focused, and your body will also be healthy and blah, blah, blah. So I started thinking, can I connect exercise to like something I have been doing for a long time on a consistent basis that I actually like doing, which is gaming. I considered getting one of those like PlayStation VR headsets and
Learn the revolutionary potential of Notion workers. This course provides a comprehensive guide on how to leverage this powerful feature to automate tasks, connect external data, and build complex business logic within your workspace. By the end, you'll have successfully deployed your own custom workers, regardless of your programming background.
Notion recently released one of its biggest updates ever, but very few people can actually use it. I am talking about workers. Basically, workers are the missing puzzle piece in Notion. They allow you to do practically anything. Bring data from external applications into Notion? Sure. Build complex business logic and codify kind of any workflow that you need? No problem. But there's one issue. You need code. Now, in 2026, that of course doesn't mean you can't use them if you're not an engineer. That's exactly what this video is for. Over the next few minutes, we will go over everything you need, from why workers, sort of like a compromise here. On this one, it's Matthias. Let's assign that task to Matthias, right? So you can see you can build really elaborate systems. Again, the world is your oyster, but this is kind of our base information, right? Now we want to create a worker that says, hey, okay, whenever we have a new campaign here, right? Or let's say whenever we set a campaign to in progress, maybe let's do that. Now we set a project to in progress. We want to make sure that it checks what's the project type, gets these tasks, and assigns them. All these setup steps, right? Just make sure that later down our life is easier. So here I have I'm back in Codex, right? I actually already have created my main folder, right, for this specific one, right? Auto task creation. And now I'm going to ask it, hey, can you please set up the files, right, that I want here, and keep them updated throughout our session. And then once done, please also load the skills, right? If you watched some of my previous videos, you know how important skills are for AI. Because skills are basically just small instructions that teach your AI a specific thing. And I always like to think of it like, my AI as a Pokemon, right? And now I can teach it something new. And we always want to teach it the right set of skills for a project. When it comes to building Notion workers, that's of course, how do you interact with them? And luckily, Notion is creating these skills for us. So all we need to do is point it at the right address. Again, link for that down below in the description, and it's going to set itself up. Now, even though skills are a concept that comes initially from Anthropic and so from the company behind Claude, works exactly the same way in Codex, right? Also there you would tell Codex, hey, please set this up. Codex won't have a Claude ND file, right? But sort of general instructions. But same for the other types, right? README, learnings, changelog, and then of course the worker skills. So while this is working, we can already talk about the next part, and that is then explaining the actual thing you're trying to build. When it comes to that, I highly, highly recommend that you are going to get yourself a dictation tool. It's so much better talking to AI rather than having to type this all out. My two favorites are Monologue if you are on a Mac, or Whisperflow if you are not. Link to them down below in the description. Both amazing, really, really cool tools. Work also on mobile, right? And they will level up your AI skills so much. We just ran our first ever live workshop, right, with a small group of people. And it was so cool to see everyone talk to the AI. And the feedback throughout was that, hey, now that I talk to it, it's so much better than before. So take the series, right, get yourself that. It's really worth it. So with that out of the way, right, AI was working in the background. So
in this video, I'm going to talk about my experience with the CKAD exam. That's the real thing. Now, like with a lot of exams now that are somewhere, there is a system compatibility check. desk, being able to showcase what's under your desk, what's behind your desk, then clutter-free, as you saw in the pictures I showed, clutter-free. I had to clear everything off my desk. I had my camera sat behind my desk, which was actually okay, that wasn't a problem, as well as my big light here that I have. And I needed a light because otherwise you're presented with, once the browser, any requests that they are asking for, just ends, right? It just closes, it says thank you. And I had a question about my score, and I just went in. I went in there, I filled out this question. You can see it in, there you go, score is 0. You fill in the date of when you took the exam, so mine was last week. It was this exam. They didn't even ask really any questions. They said, we will rerun we'll rerun the script. We'll rerun the
My name is Farhan Thauer. I'm the head of engineering at Shopify. And I want to spend some time thinking through this question, which is with AI coming and doing so many parts of the jobs of engineers, I want to explore what is our job now? Because really things have really changed, especially for engineering, but across all of R&D and even actually for other disciplines as well. And so I want to explore this question. But before we explore this question, I first want to take a little bit of a moment of silence. This tweet really hit me hard. This is the culmination of all of the software that we have come to use in all of our lives, including many of you, me too, that we wrote character by character. And it's amazing to think that everything up until now was written this way. So moment of silence, a little bit of crying maybe, because it was using tools to plan and analyze. You might be spending your time validating, make my task. You're the one not necessarily writing the code. You are working with an AI agent and you are trying to plan out how to build something for your end customers. And so things are changing and how you spend your time is changing. Hence the question, if I think about the architecture of what I'm building, companies famously think about things in different ways. A real part of building software and actually working with customers and inside your teams is the learning process. We actually have a funny story about this. Pre-LLMs, I had a pretty large team, about 50 engineers working on one of our projects, and they spent 18 months building out, in this case, like something for our merchants. And we were just about to launch it. We had a famous Toby review. Toby's our founder and CEO. And we walked through the architecture, we walked through everything we built. We showed it to him, he's like, this is great. We should launch it. And right when we were walking out the door from the meetings, pre us being remote, he stopped and he said, actually, one question. If you could start over, how would you build it? And the team kind of stopped and they're like, well, and then somebody went up to the whiteboard and said, well, knowing everything I know now, we would have built it this way. And he described a completely different and simpler architecture. And Toby said, well, why don't you build that? And literally what happened was we pivoted and he said, just delete what you did and start over, because what he was trying to show us was the learning was the collateral, not the code. And so what we did was we deleted that. We didn't actually delete the code because that's super hard to do. But we came up with this way to actually use what we learned, meaning we were allowed to look at that code but not cut and paste it, because that is the natural tendency. And we rebuilt the system in 3 months. And what happened was we had a much simpler, elegant solution because the learning was the collateral, not the code. Bottleneck, and guess what? Another bottleneck appears. And so what's happening is he is optimizing the factory. We spend a lot of time thinking through how to build things in a way such that people can build on top of us. One mantra we have at Shopify is we always try to build infrastructure. So one example, if I could build a feature in 2 weeks, or I could build infrastructure in 2 months that allows me to build that same feature in 1 hour, I will always choose the latter. That means we try to focus on infra as the way to enable our development. A trade-off between 2 weeks and 2 months. Maybe can write all the code. I don't have to think through that trade-off of. It has been going on for a while. We were the first users of GitHub Copilot in 2021. That's a year before ChatGPT. I mostly bullied the CEO of GitHub to give it to us. And that allowed us to be in this age of autocomplete, if you folks remember that. Where Toby dropped what we call a tweet heard around the world, which is that AI is going to be a baseline expectation for employees at Shopify. What was funny about this tweet was not that it was first an internal memo and then it became a tweet, was that CTOs and CEOs would text me after this came out and share with me their own version of this same message. How long does it take you to get? We're a company of about 8,000 people. I bought 1,500 licenses, and in the first week I ran out of all of those licenses. And I think the most interesting thing that I learned, and also I shared with Cursor, was that it wasn't the typical disciplines that were using AI. So I thought right away it would be engineers, product, data scientists, maybe designers. Instead, what I saw was finance, HR, sales, marketing. They were using Cursor as a way for them to get a window into Codex. And we even have an internal tool called River that we use. That it's like an agentic substrate across the whole company that you can ask it questions, it can write code for you. But it just shows you that people have choice. And our first step in kind of getting to that AI reflexive moment was literally just dropping Cursor. and see like what are the top merchant frustrations. In 2024, we had 75 interns at Shopify, and in 2025 and in 2026, we have 1,000. The reason to bring the interns for work was not for charity. You know, some people are like, oh, it's community service, bring interns, and you know, it's like good for them and it's a good experience. It was the opposite for us. We wanted them to come in and teach us how to work. Think about the interns and the folks in college these days and early talent. What percentage of their life have they been with AI? And so these folks, we wanted, literally my tweet was the AI Centaur moniker. The idea of human plus LLM together can build something better. And I really like this term, AI Centaur. Well, people call it the Opus 4.5 moment or GPT 5.2 moment. This is where a lot of the world is better at writing code. Should you write code anymore? Right? It's an open question. So how we think about expectations of the company. The word token maxing became a noun because what's happening is people are just using tokens over and over. And because we had become AI reflexive at the beginning, we wanted to move away, focused on being on the leaderboard. Right? Something interesting is this idea of like, hey, these people are doing like actual reasoning and the tokens they use are more expensive per million tokens versus those people who are just using lots of tokens. We don't have any limits of tokens at Shopify. We do have circuit breakers. A circuit breaker really is just something to find whether you are you have a runaway agent. And we've seen this happen, right? You might try to introspect. That hadn't. Parkinson's law. One of my favorite laws, right? Which is basically the amount of time you give something is how long it's going to take. If I ask you for something by Friday, you'll give it to me by Friday. If I ask you for something for next Friday, you'll give it to me next Friday. And now what's amazing about Parkinson's law and AI is not changing. Learning. I talked about this before. Everything that we focus on is to learn as much as possible. The code is not the collateral. The learning is the collateral. You want a keyboard, but on multiple keyboards. But pair programming hasn't changed. There's going to be things that you learn with another human in front of a computer, along with an LLM, that you wouldn't learn with an LLM alone. And yes, you know, you can use these clankers to write the code and you're going to learn some things, but having another smart human and working together at the planning stage and at the validation stage, and of course, the coding stage will allow the learning to increase. And again, don't forget, learning is the goal. This is a real picture of pair programming. 2 people, 1 computer, typically could be 2 monitors and 2 keyboards, but the idea is 2 people working together against the same goal. And yes, in today's parlance, they will have an LLM also. This is one of my favorite pair programming quotes, not to make this talk about pair programming, but the idea is that it's not lines of code. It's never been lines of code. Anytime I talk to executives, they're like, wait a sec, if I have 2 engineers, like they're going to write less. I'm like, yeah, hopefully even less than that. The whole point is not lines of code. Vibe codes something and shows it to you, like, look how easy it is. I built this thing, and why can't you just deploy this production? A prototype is not production. I see this all the time. Don't forget I have a CEO who codes. He will say the same thing to me. Wait a sec, I just built this thing in 5 minutes. Why did it take the team a month? I'm like, because the prototype is not the production level quality of code. Still true and has not changed. But prototyping is an amazing way for engineers to use the largest, most expensive models. We let them only use Opus 4.5 or GPT 5.5. We don't, or Gemini 3.5. We don't let them use a smaller model because we believe that the human time is worth more than the clanker time. What that means is, if a human used a smaller model and a small bug was introduced, it would take them many, many hours to find it versus if they just used the bigger model. So as the bigger models come out, we use them. We don't let people use smaller models, at least in engineering. 2, the bottleneck is code review. You probably already thought about this when I came up with that bottleneck slide. Lots of code is being generated. How do you review it all? Right? Let me show you the 4 scariest letters in the human language. Every fucking PR says this thing, and then it might still have a problem in it. It might still cause a lie side incident. Like, it's insane. And so if you thought your current process is working and you're like, I can't let an AI look at my code, look at these letters. Your humans were not looking at the code. They were not good at this. So you should do something else. And so we use accounts, and I'll show you a slide on the Council of LLMs, but we use lots of other things using AI tools to actually help figure out whether these code artifacts should go to production. Possibility here. They're looking for other things. Problem. I went to Waterloo. My first year, I did a math degree. We were not allowed to use a calculator. So the whole first year was no calculator, and then second year we got a calculator. It forced me to learn everything by hand. Everybody learned everything by hand, and then you can introduce the calculator. So, right, this is kind of like the chess entrepreneurs. You think we're going to try to shrink? No, we think everyone can be more productive. There's even a funny blog post that came out. Somebody wrote this. The AI setup behind Shopify's 23,000 engineers. I'm like, I'm a quarter of the way there. It feels like we have 23,000 engineers to somebody. That's awesome. We only have 3,000. I want somebody to write the article that says, you know, the power behind Shopify is 100,000 engineers. US hire 11,000 interns this year. Everything, get over it. This is what's happening. You should try to embrace it. You will spend more time on other parts of the ecosystem, right? Of the SDLC, you're going to spend time on planning, you're going to spend time on validation. And you might change your seniority mix. I just introduced 1,000 interns. And by the way, I convinced Cloudflare to do 1,000 interns. And then I saw Matt Garman at AWS hire 11,000 interns this year. Everything's changing across seniorities. You might decide differently. You might decide to hire more mid-level. You might decide to hire more senior. And then what's the same? Taste and judgment. You're still going to have